Agriculture reminds us that the landscape is in no small part man-made. Mountains are difficult to move, but rivers can be diked, dams can be built, reservoirs can be built, and things like rice farming require adequate irrigation and water systems from very early on in Chinese history. We have a focus on building canals both for irrigation and for the transport of goods. The landscape also has natural transportation corridors connecting the major population centers together, going between the mountains. We can predict more or less where a population will be centered given the landscape, and we can see if we look at these highway routes from the Ming and Qing dynasties that the modern railway system and the old highways are very closely related. But the population that the government registered and taxed did change over time. We should not think that China, with its population going from the first registration with around 60 million people to contemporary China with 1.3 billion, that the registered population stayed constant in its geographic distribution. Here I'm going to show you four maps from the Han, the Tang, the Sung, and the Ming, which illustrate the movement of population. There are exceptions. There are a couple major routes that are not really about linking population centers in the sense that they are in China proper, but they're linking very distant population centers or centers of wealth. And one is the Silk Road, which goes from the Wei River Valley, where Chang'an, the capital of the Han and the Tang dynasties, was located, out to the west, through the Tarim Basin, across the mountains, into Central Asia. The second set of routes is the sea route. Sea routes connecting China directly to Japan, and sea routes connecting China to Southeast Asia and South Asia. This is the routes that Chinese sailed abroad in, and Arab traders very often came to China along. Notice also that the sea routes fit very well with the southeastern coast. The reason for that is all the harbors along the southeast. China also has two great man-made features. One, perhaps the best known, is the Great Wall. Although it's not clear that it ever really was an effective border, it was certainly meant to be a border between the central states and the tribal peoples. We see walls being built very early in Chinese history, in the 3rd, 4th century BC, being revived at various points, but always being part of consciousness about the north and where the northern border was, even when it wasn't, in fact, the real border. The other great feat of engineering in China is the Grand Canal from 589 AD, which connected the capital in the north with the rice-growing areas of the southeast. Now, Bill asked me to talk with you about and show you how you can figure out the names of provinces, and so that's what we're going to do now. So we have the four cardinal directions, north, east, south, and west. Bei, Dong, Nan, and Xi. So if you remember those, and now let's turn to the physical features, the Hu, the lakes, the He, the river, the Yellow River, the Jiang, which is the Yangtze River, the Shan, which means mountains. If you combine the four directions with the physical terms for physical features, then you'll see that Shandong, the province, means east of the mountains. So take a look at this and see if you can figure out the rest for yourself. Just in case you couldn't, we'll go over the rest of them, but also point out that there are parts of China which this doesn't fit at all, and you still are going to have to at some point learn those province names. Those are particularly important for looking at China today. Provinces don't appear really in the form that we now think of them as also having administrations until rather later in Chinese history, around, I'd say, the beginning nascent sort of proto-provinces in the 10th, 11th century. But they're fully part of the organization of Chinese space today. Later on in the course, we'll have a chance to talk about urbanization, cities, and other issues. But let's turn now to the last of our larger themes for this sort of getting a big picture of China's history, the issue of identity.